Jamsu here with another tutorial. Today, I'm going to be teaching you how to get your animations, your custom animations, from Maya into Unreal, okay? So, I'm going to assume that you already have your character rigged and he's basically already ready to be animated. You maybe even got some animations going, but hopefully you had your rig file as a separate file from your animation files, because that needs to be a thing that needs to happen. So, assuming that that is the case, and you have your rig with just the bone set up, what you need to do is hit up the outliner, and I have my rig set up with a bunch of controls, which is the reason there are a bunch of constraints here. You don't want any of that stuff when you're importing it into Unreal. So basically, you want to go through and delete all of the constraints, because otherwise Unreal will read them as bones, and that doesn't help, because when you import your animations, you're going to get all sorts of errors that aren't going to help you out. So if you have constraints, make sure they're all gone. This goes for your initial rig import and all your animation imports as well. Assuming you just went through and cleared all of your constraints, or you never had constraints to begin with, next you want to select all of your bones that make up your rig, as well as the meshes that are going to be attached to the rig, which in my case are the sword, the necklace, and then the character's body itself. And then you want to go to export selection. I'm going to be saving mine on the desktop. I already have it exported as an FBX, but make sure it's an FBX, and you also need to make sure that your axis conversion is set to Z on the up, because otherwise your character will import sideways, and that's no bueno. Okay? And then that should be it. If you run into any other errors, chances are you probably forgot to paint certain weights, as in some vertices don't have any weight on them, so you want to make sure that that's a thing. And also you want to make sure that when you're importing your rig, it's in the bind pose, as in the pose that was made, essentially the T pose of your character without any animations at all, because if you have animations on it, it's probably going to mess up. Okay, so while you're off doing whatever you were doing, I created this walk cycle real quick. And you might have an idle animation you want to import, you might have an attack animation you want to import. It doesn't matter what animation it is, this should work across all animations, and it's essentially the same as importing the rig, just without the mesh. But I'll go through it all again. So, if you're fancy and you have controls like I do, you're going to have to remove all the constraints again, which can get pretty annoying to do. You can open up the root window, everything, by pressing shift on the plus sign, shift clicking, and let's say you want to quickly create something that can select all of these super annoying constraints that you don't want to have to click one by one. What you gotta do is select every single one by one, but you only got to do this once, and make sure that you don't mess up. I'm gonna hit him with the montage right here as I go through and select everything. I messed up. Okay. So now I have all of my basically non-bone actors selected. Anything that wasn't part of the original rig needs to go. This includes the constraints, this includes the effectors from any IK handles you may have, any of that funky stuff. And what you need to do is hit up the script right here, and the way you can quickly create a button that selects all of these is to go to the near top of the list where you started selecting all of your constraints. For me, it looks like I started selecting right here. So beanie parent constraint. So yeah, that's the first one. So I started selecting here. What you can do is from the top, just drag all the way down. which is all of the selections you just made. Mine are pretty long because I have a bunch of constraints under a bunch of parents, and you can take the highlighted text and drag it into here. I messed up selecting right here, but hopefully you didn't do that. The red's okay, that just means I undid the action. And then from here, you can select all of these and then drag it into your shelf right here. And then it'll ask you for Mel or Python. I'm not too sure what the difference is. I just normally go with Mel, and what that does is that now when you click the thing, it'll select all of your constraints, which saves you a decent amount of time and having to go through and do all that stuff. Okay. After you create the script, you save out your Maya file as essentially I'm about to export this file. So for me, I'd save it out as anim walk export, but you can name it whatever you want. So from here, you have your walk cycle, and you still have your controls controlling your bones, and that's fine and dandy. So what you need to do next is bake down the animation to the bones. So you go to the animation shelf and you go to make sure you select the entire hierarchy, which you can do very quickly by clicking the root, which is just the entire, I guess, rig. It'll be like your main control point, and you can either, if you already have it shelved, you can click the select hierarchy key, but if you don't have it shelved, you can click root and go to select and then hit hierarchy right here, and it does the same thing. And then from there, you want to hit them with the bake animation. And what this does is it bakes all of the animation that's happening to your bones onto the rig itself. So now it's moving without the controls, and that is why we delete all the constraints, because we need the bones to move without the controls to get it into Maya. So after you do that, you select your little script that you made earlier, and then you can delete all the constraints, and now you just have the clean rig by itself, and the animation still plays on it. And what you want to do from there is similar to exporting the original rig. You select the hierarchy, or you select all the bones, and then you hit them with the export selection. You don't want to export all, and you can save it wherever. And this time you want to make sure animation is ticked. And I know it says to bake the animation here. I just do this as like a safety precaution. You want to make sure you copy the frame range so it's 1 to 34. Step, I'm not too sure exactly what that means, but I think what that does is cut the end frame off if you have like a looping animation, so that way it loops perfectly, because otherwise you'll have the same frame or the same posing at the beginning and end, which means that you have the same pose for 2 frames, and you don't want that. So since it's already baked, you might be able to go down to 0, but you might want to ask your professor about that. So after you have those settings set, make sure you're still Z up. You can export it as animation, walk, or breathe, or attack, or whatever. And you're basically going through the same process with baking the animation, deleting the constraints, and then exporting the animation as an FBX for all your other animations you want to get to Unreal. Every single one should be able to work this way. Now, we're in Unreal, and here are a few of the animations I was able to import. They're not all polished, as you can see, but they get the idea across. We got some attack animations in here, a run cycle over there, got an idle right here. I'm using the walk cycle to walk around, all this other fun stuff, and this was all done through the processes labeled before. And I have all of my animations in one handy dandy little folder right here. And basically, the way you can set this up now, so that way you actually can move your character, is first, you gotta get it into Unreal, because otherwise you ain't gonna be able to move nothing. Okay, so I made a new folder called Characters, and from here, you just go to Import and you select your original rig FBX, which mine was just base model, which included the sword, the character, and the necklace he's wearing. Yours might have other stuff in it, but you select the original rig that was in the T-pose and you import that. And actually, let me do that real quick. Boop, 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 boop. So what should happen is that you get this menu right here. Skeletal mesh should be checked on, but you should, if this is your first time importing the rig, you don't want to select any rig if it's like a unique rig. All this other stuff can actually remain however you like, but me personally, it starts off as import normals. I import normals and tangents, and I always make sure that I don't import materials or textures, because then it creates extra materials, which is pretty annoying. So yeah, you can hit them with the import, and then that should be it. It should create these 3 files right here. You have the actual rig itself, and then you have a physics asset, which is basically just how the collision is determined. You can see where the collision is, and then you have like I guess this is the rig or whatever. But you should have these 3 files: purple, orange, and blue. And then from there, now you probably want to get your animations in. It's the same ordeal. You just go to wherever your animations are and you import that FBX, except it's asking me if I want to replace something. So this time the difference is that you do want to select a skeleton that you already have. It should be the rig that you just imported, and animation length could be the exported time. That should work fine. And now we should have our little walk cycle in here now, which is good. But we got that's out of the way now. So if you want to be able to basically make your own character have a full range of locomotion, you're going to need to create at least an idle and a walk. At least those 2, so that way you can stand still and move around without having your character be lifeless. You can put in all this other stuff, you can put a run if you want, but I'm mostly just going to teach how to do the walk and idle, and everything else is pretty similar. It's just a bit more logic. Oh. Now it's time to actually set up the blueprints. So what you need to do is hit them with the blueprint class, and you want to make sure you create a character. And you can name it whatever you want. You can name it blueprint my character like Scott does. You can name it blueprint, I don't know, but you can name it whatever, and then after you name it, you should be able to open it up and your character should be in here. However, he may not have any animations on him. He may be like let's see, he'll probably be like this. So the next step is to create an animation blueprint, which is just going into right-click, animation, create animation blueprint, and then you want to select skeleton here, and then you can hit OK, and then you can name it whatever you want. But I already have one, so there you go. Got your animation blueprint now. So there's a few logic things that we need to set up first, and that involves the locomotion. So in order to create this, all you do is type, or right-click and type, right-click and type state machine. And basically this is what determines what animations are used for character, and you can name this whatever you want. I just name it Locomotion, as right here. And then from here, what you'll want to do after you create your state machine is drag out and type cache, which needs save the cache pose, which you'll be referencing down here. So as you can see, the thing just broke, and that's because the Locomotion cache and this are not the same cache. So in order to remedy that, you just got to go to, whatever you named this guy, you just call that and plug it into what would be default slot, unless you made a new slot. And the reason why it's the default slot is because when you import animations, let's see, it should be in here somewhere. Yes, I believe, yeah, right here. So The import animations, by default, they use the default slot, and this is for things like attack animations and whatnot, because those aren't called from the Locomotion blueprint. You call those from the blueprint itself. When, like on mouse click or something, like, oh, left click does the attack, and you need to have this set up in here like this, so that way it'll work properly, and then you just plug it into final pose and everything should work. You probably won't have an animation yet, and that's because we didn't set up the actual Locomotion. You go into your Locomotion by double clicking your Locomotion. So originally you'll only have your entry right here, and what you do is from the entry you can just drag and drop your idle animation if you have one, or your walk animation, but we're going to assume at least have an idle and walk, and then you can proceed on. So you just drag your idle animation in here, and all you got to do from your entry is drag out into the idle with arrow, and it basically creates a connection point, and from there on your character should be able to move, but he won't have the walk animation or anything tied to him. He'll just glide around kinda like this whenever you move him. So you have your idle plugged in, and then next is just the walk, and all you do is for the walk you just drag and drop it in here, and then you got to create a transition state between from your idle to your walk and your walk into your idle. And what this does is basically set a condition that says, hey, you can only do this if this condition is met. And you determine these conditions through the event graph. You determine those conditions through your animation blueprints event graph. You don't have to copy all of this one for one. I'm making attacks which needs a few different conditions, but you really only need to have the event blueprint update animation and your character blueprint here, and then from here you can go straight into here, which is calculate direction, and you only need pretty much all of the stuff that's highlighted in orange to get an idle and walk going. If you're trying to determine whether he's falling or not, if you have like a falling animation, then you get this stuff, and that's how you would do that. But basically just copy what I have highlighted here and should be good to go. Assuming that you copied everything I have, you should have two new variables now, which are speed and direction, which come from your blueprint, the character blueprint that this will be linked to. And all you got to do now is on the state machine, the transitions, you just got to double click them and say, oh, if you want to go from an idle into a walk, your speed just needs to be greater than 10. And if it's greater than 10, he'll go into the walk. And then for it to go from a walk back into the idle, like if you stop moving, you just say, oh, the speed is less than 10. And that's it. Now your character should be able, or your character has the logic set up to be able to, oh, I broke it. So yeah, after you create your animation blueprint, you go back into here and you got to choose anim class and whatever animation blueprint you made. And now he should start idling. And now if you have proper logic set up, you should have an idle and a walk that you can use. And that's pretty much how you get basic locomotion in there. If you don't know how to code in walking itself, I can leave this here. This stuff right here, these are custom input actions that you make in the project settings. Edit project settings and input, and basically move forward, backward, and move left and right. This is W and S, left and right's A and D. As you can see here, W, since that's forward, that's positive, S is negative, A is to the left, which is actually negative, and D is to the right, which is positive. So that's how you set up your movement, or at least the input, and then you don't need this necessarily. You can just have your axis value go straight into your scale value, but you need to have a movement input, and then these, you basically just need to have this set up exactly as it is, and you should be able to move around with WASD. And then if you want to be able to look around with the camera, what you gotta do is make a camera, add component, just type in camera. You don't want a cine camera, you just want, or a cinematic camera, you just want a regular camera. And then you create a spring arm, and you attach the camera to that spring arm. And now what that does is basically whenever the spring arm collides with something, the camera will go in, like in the super professional games. So like if we walk over to this wall right here and we turn the camera, there's no collision on this wall. That's interesting. Oh yeah, I guess it does it here. So yeah, the camera will go in if it's hitting collision, and then once it's not hitting collision, it'll go back to its original position, which is pretty good if you don't want stuff like this to be happening. So you have that stuff set up, which is just your walking and your camera look. I'll teach you how to add, let's say you have an attack animation that goes on. So I'll teach you how to add one attack animation, which is just this guy right here. He's still in a very blocky pose right now, or it's just in blocking stage rather. But you have your attacking animation. What you need to do is right click your import and go to create and create an animation montage. And this is how we use the animation in the blueprint we made, because we can't use the green animation in the blueprint. We can only use the montages. So basically you need to set up another input action that deals with attacking, and I'm just going to disconnect this. This is basically the logic for making combos. It's a bit more in-depth than what you see here. There are other videos. There's a specific video I looked up that I can probably leave a link to that teaches you how to make combos, and I just copied that video. But if you only have like one attack that you want, or maybe even if it's just walking up to an item that you want them to interact with, and you push like a button, E to interact or whatever, all you gotta do is basically get a reference to the mesh, like you can see up here, and you have to make sure that you get the anim instance, because if you don't do this, when you create the play animation montage, you can't connect the mesh into the target. You need the anim instance. Oh wait, play montage. Oh, it's just montage play, sorry. But you need to have the anim instance. And then, so basically this would be like on your attack or on interact or whatever, and you have your animation imported. All you got to do is go and select montage. As you can see, on my other animations that aren't montages didn't show up, so it has to be a montage. And you can adjust the play rate, which is like the play speed, or you can choose when the animation starts here. It's pretty handy stuff. And then now, when I press the attack button, which for me is just left click, he'll play the animation. However, since I didn't set up any parameters, I can just spam it, and he'll just keep playing the animation from the get. So if you don't want that kind of stuff to happen, and it's like an interact thing, you can probably just put like a do once and have it reset after the animation is done, or your little cutscene is done or whatever. Or if it's like a combo thing that you want to happen, then I would recommend following the combo tutorial that I will be providing the link for. I don't know how you'll get that. It'll probably be in the documentation for this. I don't know. Should be pretty easy to get though. If you don't have a link to it, just look it up on YouTube. It's very easy to find. But yeah, that's how you set up some basic locomotion and an attack. But getting things like a run in here and other attacks to go, that's just extending upon what I've covered in this video, just with a bit more logic. So for like the run, for example, I have it going from a walk, and then there's a walk to run, which is like a wind up basically. It's like anticipation, and then it goes into the run. So for the walk, the transition, I guess what needs to happen, the transition rule is that you need to be moving, so greater than 10, and you need to be sprinting, which I determine in my main blueprint. I made a sprint key in the editor preferences. When you press shift, it toggles sprint to true, and then when you let go shift, it toggles it off. So you need to be moving and pressing sprint. And what will happen is it'll go into the walk to run animation, which is this guy right here. He does like a little skip before he starts his run, and then from there, like when that animation plays, you just basically say, oh, when the time remaining on whatever animation that is less than a specific kind of time, which for me would be, let's see, where is it? Anim, idle, to run, walk to run. So for me, at least in this step animation, I want it to happen like right around here when he's actually in the running pose. And I saw that roughly that meant that there's about 0.3 seconds left in the animation. So you would say when the time is less than 0.3, then you can enter the transition. This will do it by itself. And then from there, you'll have a walk to run animation. So now he transitions to the skip, and then he goes into the run. And then going back to the walk is the same logic that we did for like the walk back to the idle. He still has to be moving, but he's not sprinting anymore. And then it should basically do itself. Using the jump or jump start, if you have something that deals with jumping, you just basically check if your character's falling or not, which is where this stuff would come into play right here, this specific chain. Yeah, so that's how you can get your custom Maya animations into Unreal relatively smoothly. If you get an error upon importing your rig for whatever reason, there's a chance that you missed deleting a constraint, or maybe you deleted a bone by accident and Maya or Unreal can't find all the bones that you have in the original rig. It could be that. Yeah, that's mostly the biggest issue I've come across, which took a surprising amount of time to figure out the whole constraints ordeal. But yeah, you should be able to get all your animations into Unreal now. You should be able to get your stuff going. Make your little indie game. Look at these guys. Look at them go. Whoa.